Hi, everybody. Welcome. Happy Sunday. Welcome to our fifth meeting, which today is about a fairly hot topic, which is branches, and also some cool little tricks. You see up there the disclaimer. If you are looping or thinking of looping, you can silently raise your right hand and say that you understand that this is an experimental product. This is do it yourself. This is all up to you and your own risk. Nobody's forcing you to do anything, telling you to do anything, or doing it for you. So there you go. Please stay safe with this. Second thing I want to say in the days of coronavirus, please all stay in. Please all stay safe. Don't climb on the roof if you don't have to. Don't put yourself at risk for even breaking a limb because you don't want to have to be at a hospital. So take extra caution because this is a tricky time. So anyway, thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Kenny.
Sounds scary. Okay, you're doing such a good job. Okay, here's the agenda that Joanne brought up. So this is going to be a little more live, moving around, rather than like a prepared slideshow. So, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go over branches, and what I'm going to try to do so that I'm not repeating stuff that's been done better in the past is I'm mostly going to point you to where these resources are to find out more details, and we'll skim the surface of each of these just enough to get you started and realize that if you need help, there's already some fantastic videos and write-ups on some of this stuff, and then we can take some questions afterwards. All right, so branches. Katie's done a great job. I should have actually brought her stuff up too. Katie's done a great job talking about branches here in Loop Docs. Like, what are they? What are they for? So, like, this is in Loop Docs. This is where under FAQs you're going to have the branch FAQ. There's a bunch of stuff in here kind of explaining branches. Katie likes to talk about repos and branches as basically like cookbooks and recipes. And you guys are all who are on here probably are familiar with the idea that there's a main branch in Loop that most people download when they follow the instructions, and they go in here to build, and you say download. Where'd they go? There, download loop codes, like the last one, right? Your links on this page will take you to the main branches usually that they'll direct you to. The main two are master and dev. Luckily, we've simplified from master and then like sort of an omnipod master, and now master is just master for everybody, and dev is dev for everybody. So dev is development. This is where all kind of the action happens, where all the new stuff starts to be put in and kind of tested together. So think of it as master is what's mostly been like tried and true and been tested, and most people should install this almost all the time. And it doesn't get updated super often, so it's not like you have to be paying attention a lot to make sure that you're in the know when things are updated. So sticking with master is much less intensive. So if that's you, master's for you. Dev is short for development, basically the coding, the geeky people that all write the cool stuff that makes this whole thing work. But there's another layer before this. It's called like a feature testing branch. So you might have someone might try to add a new feature, and what they'll do is they'll take a copy of the repository, the loop code, and they're going to go over here off to the side and like play with it and add their feature and try to get it to work. And then once it's working, some people might try to help test it, sometimes not. Then it gets moved into development. Development's where all those little features kind of come together, try to make sure everything plays nicely together, and more people can access it easier because there are a lot more people using dev than like somebody playing in their own little version of Loop. So that's why this is listed here, both dev and master. So dev's a little more cutting edge, or if you catch wind of something that you think's been fixed or added, likely it's in dev and not in master yet. It takes a little while for it to get there. So development's where you're going to want to play if it's kind of you that kind of want to be a little bit on the cutting edge, or you see something that is interesting to you, mentioned in the group or whatever, or the other resources we're going to walk you through. You'll probably end up going to dev. So what we'll do is I'll walk you through just how to find these things and where they are, how you can get these. You have the links here for master and dev, but what if you want to see what's been going on in either of these branches, what changes have been made, do you even care? Some of it's going to be a little bit, you're probably going to have to learn to like kind of sort of read some code if you really want to dig into what's actually changed. Sometimes you can just ask an intelligent question just by looking at what you can find in the list of what's been changed. So that way you're not totally unsure of what's happening, or even you just want to know the last time it was updated. You just want to know, hey, I updated 3 months ago. Has anything changed? So we can figure all that out. In the branches,
Kenny, is there any rule of thumb of who you think is wise to be on master and who's wise to be or courageous to be on dev?
Courageous is good, I guess. So master. Master is going to be for most people that just want to like install Loop and try it and use it and not have to worry about knowing if there's a big fix out all the time. The challenge with development or a dev branch or even a feature branch is that things can be fixed and changed more rapidly. And it might be important, right? It could be something slightly dangerous somebody put in and it's not working quite the way it was intended. So you need to make sure that you are aware when those things are changed or get fixed. So you're not encountering a bug that shouldn't be there. Or something in the masters typically, for the most part, it's been used long enough that you shouldn't run anything significant, like dangerous. It might be something quirky or a little annoying, but not likely dangerous, right? Most likely that's been found by the time master gets there. So you have to be committed to some degree about, watching in the Facebook group or the Zulip chat, which we'll cover in a second, or just looking at GitHub occasionally. So just to kind of keep track of it. So if you're not really wanting to do that, then you probably shouldn't be dabbling in dev or in these feature branches, unless you like are connected to someone in the community that might tell you when something happens. So that's the general rule of thumb. But once you're equipped to know how to check up on these things, then you can more accurately decide if you want to dabble in some of these more cutting edge flavors of Loop. Does that make sense? What do you think?
Yeah, if I were to add something to that, what I would say is if you're on a feature branch, you need to be following Zulip for that branch or whatever chat function it's using and be willing to update it once a week, potentially, if it's going through changes.
And they say, and you see those kind of scary posts out there, and like you need to be ready to update at a moment's notice. And essentially what that means is willing and able and comfortable enough to do an update if something comes up. A lot of times it's not that frequent. Like most of the time, like right now, some of these like dev and automatic bolus are relatively stable. They're not changing that frequently. Pete just did a whole bunch of changes this weekend, when he has time to do that. But you just need to be ready and able. So if updating, if getting into Xcode and updating a branch or build in Loop is something that causes you a lot of stress, and you don't feel like going through the effort of practicing so that you get more comfortable with it, then I would just steer clear of dev and any feature branch beyond that. I would stick with master. So if that stresses you out, or it's something that's really difficult for you to do, or you've needed help every single time, and you're not willing to venture into doing it yourself fully, then I would definitely just hang out in master for sure. And just, listen carefully and impatiently wait for the features to come to master that you're looking for.
Can I ask
one additional thing, Kenny, also is I would suggest that if you're on master and you haven't updated since November 20th when Loop 2.0 came out, you should be on Loop 2.0.
Yeah, definitely.
And also a reminder of you need to, at the minimum, update once a year. And if you don't update once a year, there's a potential that your Loop could sunset on you.
Yeah, that's a good point to make.
Because of the limitations of the developer.
Yeah, your developer. So yeah, if you guys all have the developer licenses, usually choosing the free one, which requires you to build every week. So you're buying the annual $99 Apple developer license to build your Loop stuff. You do need to build at least once a year after you've paid your updated your renewal for your developer license, and you get a new certificate. So like pretty much around month 11 of your 12 months, you should hopefully be getting a notice renewing your subscription paying for it again, and then your certificate, which is the thing that tells LoopDirect you're allowed to build it essentially, will be renewed for another 12 months.
We have a comment from Marion that Loop 2.0, Master Loop 2.0 was released on December 31st, 2018. Yeah. So if you haven't updated since then, that would be something you want to do.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Okay. So there we go. Let's just go like real quick. How do you find out when things have updated? There's a bunch of resources in the Loop group. You can usually find them under announcements, and there's a slew of them. Some of them involving branches, some of them not. You can get some nice, more recent posts here, but you can dig through and find like things like using Looped Group and other things from Katie about how to keep track of all this stuff. The other thing, the main thing you probably want to look at here is, oh, where'd it go? Sorry, I should have had it saved. Where's the stay in the loop? There we go. So you can sign up for announcements lists. You can get into Zulip chat, where there's a link here, and then there's the Facebook group. Those are the main areas. But then there's the Loop Docs repo, if you want to update Loop Docs, that kind of stuff. So right here in Loop Docs, our nice Bible for what we're doing here, has a link to Zulip chat, which is another place to kind of chit chat about Loop. I would say on average, the average user in Zulip chat is probably a little more technical than those that hang out just in the Facebook group. So if you feel like you have a more technical question, it's a good place to go there. Katie also has a lovely video on YouTube. She's got a bunch of them actually that you can find. So if I go back up to the home page here, go to the introduction. Wait, where'd it go? That was maybe the FAQs. Where does Katie have that nice welcome? There we go. So you also have this like intro to Loop here, but you could, it's linked to YouTube. Watch this. You click on it, takes you to YouTube. I'm not going to play it. That would be bad. Sorry, there it goes. So you can see Katie Simone. You click on Katie, and she's got a whole bunch of videos that are useful. Night Scout cleanup, Loop Docs updates, updating Night Scout, how to build a Night Scout site, Loop group. But you'll also have, she's got some older ones in here. It's always just fun to comb through Katie's old videos. There's some down here. That's the GitHub cloning, and then GitHub and OpenAPS docs. This one might not at first sound useful because it says GitHub and OpenAPS, and you guys care about Loop at the moment. But this video right here takes you through, you can kind of jump a couple minutes in, but it basically walks you through GitHub, and everything I'm going to show you right now for both of these GitHub and Night Scout and GitHub and OpenAPS docs, and even the GitHub for Beginners video, all kind of show you the same thing I'm going to show you, which is how do you know when code's been updated that you care about in GitHub. So it's all here in much more detail than I'm going to give you, but here we go.
I have a suggestion, since we're all pretty much stuck at home, and knowing that we full and well are watching Netflix and Amazon and just kind of vegging out, you might want to set a little goal of watch one of these videos a day, and set a time, because time gets very elastic right now when you're stuck at home. But put it on a schedule. Actually make a schedule and say, okay, at noon I'm going to watch Katie for 10 minutes. This stuff is actually a bunch of living documents, and they're really helpful. So this is the best time you could be doing it. So there you go. There's your homework.
Yeah, yeah. And even just playing them in the background like podcasts, you'll listen to some of it. And as you guys have been in Loop a while, you're going to find reading Loop Docs again, you'll catch new things. Watching videos like this, you'll catch new things. Like, you probably didn't really care that much about GitHub because it was confusing and overwhelming when you first started, but you're starting to hear the language enough and you're starting to care a little bit more, where now your level of understanding is getting deeper, so you can come back and pick up more every time you go through these resources. So I've done that. I'm not telling you to do something I haven't done. So what the information you need is all there. All right. So in GitHub, just a real quick, like, here it is. Here's GitHub. You guys all have an account here if you've created a Night Scout site. Hopefully most of you have. You should see your repositories you care about or subscribe to or own here on the left. But basically what you need to do is you need to find the LoopKit repository. So just a reminder that each user has a bunch of different projects underneath them. So LoopKit is the user, or like the kind of bigger library that these projects are stored under. So it has the Loop app, Loop Workspace, which we'll talk about briefly, and LoopKit, and a bunch of these other things, the CGM BLE kit, which is continuous glucose monitor, Bluetooth low energy kit. There's all these other pieces that make up Loop. Loop is not just this, whatever's in this first project here. It's got other pieces to it that make up all the brains that make it work. So, but inside the LoopKit, github.com/LoopKit, you can get into Loop. And this is, as Katie would say, your cookbook for Loop. What you can see, you guys just kind of need to know basically how to get around here. So that way, like I could teach you how to get automatic bolus branch and get it installed and everything, but the instructions are going to be the same, and I want to give you the tools to be able to do this no matter what feature is out there that you want to go grab. So you have a couple of things to pay attention to. Once you're on this code tab, you kind of have this main section here in the middle, and just below it is branch. And what does it say? It says master. So usually that's the one you start with, is the master branch. But if you wanted to find a different branch, I bet you could figure out what to do, right? You can click this button and it drops down, and here they are. And imagine that. Look what's at the top. Automatic bolus. And the other one we talked about is dev. So if you wanted to see what was going on in either of these, you could just switch to the branch. What you'll see is things will change. I'll come back here in a second. So the first thing, though, right above where it says branch is commits. Commits is basically someone made some code changes and they actually got like added to the code. They start as what they call pull requests. You see up here along the very top bar. It's just a submission like, hey, here's some code I've changed. Would you accept it or not? And so someone who has authority over this particular project can accept those code changes into the project. And once you accept them, they are now committed into the project. So you'll see there's basically 1,200 commits here. So if you click on the commits, which are all the code changes, this will tell you the activity that's been going on in this particular branch. And you can see the last update to master for version 2.0 was done on December 31st, 2019. And you can see some of the changes that happened up until that point is actually kind of a flurry of small changes that ended up in here. So for those of you who just want to know, do I have the latest version? There it is. Look at the latest commit and then compare it to the last time you made a build, the last date you did a build. Maybe you put on your calendar or whatever. You can probably figure it out by going onto your computer and finding out how old the files are. So this is the last time it was updated. If you care about what's inside each of these, you may have to go click in and try and figure it out. Hopefully there's some nice, descriptions here, like this one here, remove extra Night Scout Bluetooth always usage description key. It's something to do with Night Scout and Bluetooth. And you're like, okay, that's fine. If you want to see the pull request that was actually added to dev, you could click on this link here. And this is part of the release 2.0 pull request. And you can go into the details. And this is the official release 2.0, basically details here, everything that's been added. They remember to add to this documentation here about what's changed is all in here. So you can only click on links to pull requests. That's always nice. But what you will see a lot of times, just so you know, you'll see this merge remote tracking branch and then like a name. This says origin master into dev. Usually this is talking about basically a bunch of changes that were done in, let's say, dev and pulled into master, right? Sometimes that's what it is. Rather than seeing all the little changes that happened in dev, they're kind of packaged up into one pull request to yank all the code over into master at once, rather than seeing 75 or 100 or 200 different lists of changes here. So when you see that kind of weird phrase, merge remote tracking branch, I see Pete use this sort of language when he's combining branches together, just so you know. All right, so there are the changes. If you really want to get geeky, you can click on these links here and you can look at the actual change that was made. Like if we go into the big one for Loop 2.0, if you guys want to get real crazy, you can come in here and look at the code. And just so you know, things like, you see like a red and green line here. The red line on line 58 was what was removed, and green is what was added. Now in this case, the change is pretty simple. You can kind of see it highlighted over here next to the word the. There was a space taken out. Super complicated, right? Definitely scary. So don't get too concerned about seeing all these lines and codes. Like sometimes you can just see what was removed. You can see this project workspace was removed. Well, it wasn't replaced with anything. It's just blank. Line 25 is now blank, right? So nothing crazy there either. OS 10 image, which image to use, which version of Xcode to use, that kind of stuff. So all the green stuff is new stuff. All the red stuff is stuff that's been changed or removed in some fashion. And it usually highlights, you can see here, like iPhone SE to iPhone 8 for a test scenario, things like that. So for some of these smaller updates, you can come in here and kind of see what changed. And, you know, like I can't read all the code. I'm not a Swift developer. I have done some programming, so it's not totally foreign, but you can kind of use your common sense to try to figure out if the change maybe looks important or not, or if it's not a big deal that way. So, you know, if you're not sure, you can ask, but at least you can ask, hey, on this pull request, I can't quite tell what happened. Then you're not just some random person that's posting in Loops group saying, hey, what's changed? Like, you know, they want you to, people want you to try and figure it out on your own before they commit to helping you with what feels like everything, right? So come in here and take a look, and if you get stuck, then ask, and at least you kind of show that you've put some effort in to figuring this out. Now, if you want to switch branches and see what's been going on, switch branches. You can go to dev, and you can see all the changes that have been happening in dev. So Pete, PS2, this is Pete, made some changes April 4th, April 2nd, and March 31st. Most of these are pretty small, like a translation update for Finnish and Carthage revisions. Basically, there's some updates in some of the related modules, like the ReadyLink module and a few others that had some changes, and so you have to change, you say Carthage, it's like they're pointers to all the other pieces. So just connecting all the dots back to all the related modules. Won't go into that too much. But yeah, so most of these are pretty insignificant changes at the moment, but some of them are kind of like this health kit usage stuff has been updated recently. I haven't figured out what that's about yet, but these logs, lots of logging, persistent device logs has been updated. And you can always click on the pull request again when you see a link, and you can kind of see, and sometimes, I think this one doesn't have it, but there's some conversation that goes around. You can see the specific code changes, but sometimes there's comments in here, people asking questions, and so that might help you figure out what exactly changed and why it matters. Now, same thing with switching branches to this one we talked about before, automatic bolus. So automatic bolus has some changes, and you'll see more of this right here, remote tracking craziness into dev. Sorry, basically taking all the updates Pete did in dev recently and moved them into automatic bolus. So it's really up right now to Pete to keep the automatic bolus feature branch in sync with dev, but he doesn't do it every time. I've seen him make changes to dev and leave auto bolus alone for a while, you know, just testing out whatever the feature is and eventually come back and update it. So, you know, if he decides not to update it anymore, then that's what happens. So keep an update to know what's been changing is important. Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to maybe bring up here is I know a lot of people use Cal's Spike branch. I don't know if there's any people using the Spike branch, but the one thing about Cal's branch is he probably only goes back and updates it back to dev about once a month. So he doesn't merge it quite as often.
One, for those who don't know, Cal is a woman. She lives in Paris. And secondly, you might want to say who Pete is, because a lot of people just really have no idea.
Oh, yeah, okay. So Pete Schwam, he's basically at the moment the primary steward of the Loop code. So he's the one that has the admin access to the Loop kit and everything underneath Loop kit. So he works for Tidepool as well, but he's the one that's done the majority of the code changes in the last, I don't know, year or two, maybe more, I don't know. He's not the one who started Loop, who started coding it, but he kind of took it over. So he's kind of the main steward of the code. So if anybody wants a new feature or whatever, ultimately he's the one that has to say yes and kind of work with someone to do that. So you'll see PS2 a lot, but other people contribute. Like Kim mentioned before you started, I might get a contributor. No, not normally, but some of these people are, like the Finnish translation update. This person is the one that's been submitting the Finnish translation update, so just translating the code, the words inside Loop. So other people can contribute, and then Pete ultimately commits these changes into the code here.
Just a piece of history, Riley is his daughter who has type 1 diabetes, so that's why it's called Riley Link.
Yeah, he built the Riley link. Yes, that's probably an important one too to mention. Thanks, Joey. Okay, so there we go. So this is like how you'd really kind of tell what's going on. If you wanted to be super helpful and could, you know, replicate some problems in Loop pretty consistently, and you could just, like, you could post in Facebook, on the Facebook group, or in Zulip, and kind of ask some questions. But if you know you can repeat something over and over again, like I have something I know it's broken with the way Loop updates profiles in Night Scout, you can go into this issues tab here and submit an issue. But let's be very clear, let's not put issues everywhere, right? Don't post in Facebook and Zulip and in the issues log in GitHub. Eventually it needs to get to GitHub if it's like a real serious issue. This is kind of where these issues are hashed out ultimately. So once it's a pretty legit issue, you can come in here and you can look at what issues have been submitted, which ones currently we're looking at, the ones that have been closed recently, either because they weren't really an issue or they were resolved or whatever. If you want to look at the open ones, you can do that. And again, anyone can submit these, so it's not always some of the issues are just people just asking for help and are confused, and that's fine too. So, but yeah, the issues go here. Pull requests, things that are kind of like ideas that have been coded a little bit, and they're kind of like thoughts that may eventually get merged in, can be here. So if you want to click around and kind of see what maybe is on the forefront, if you want to put your vote behind something, you can come in here in the pull requests and kind of nudge it and give some feedback. Sometimes that helps because so few people come into GitHub. Pete or others may not really realize how pervasive this might be if they're not suffering from a certain problem or feature that they'd like to see. So, you know, you can give a thumbs up in this in GitHub or whatever to help kind of get some traction on things. That's cool too.
Kenny,
Okay.
how safe is it to comment on GitHub if you're not, without getting yelled at? Or
I'll tell you that I feel a little awkward doing it sometimes, and I'm just getting more comfortable. Like I said, if it's something you think you would just ask for help with, or maybe you could start in Facebook or Zulip and kind of like, hey, I think this is an issue. What do you think? Sometimes people ask you for things like logs and whatnot, and they may say, yeah, it's an issue. Then I would say then it's probably the best time to come in here and put something in GitHub. If you're comfortable using those other tools first, that's how I do it. I just kind of use GitHub as the more like official list of things that need to be worked on. So after I've kind of made sure that it's like a real issue, or I think it's a real issue with some certainty, then I put it in here. I don't like cluttering these up, the issues up that Katie or Pete or somebody has to come in here and start closing a bunch of these. You'll see those sometimes if you subscribe to all the updates that happen in here. You'll get updates when issues or pull requests get closed. And sometimes it can be like a cleanup day where they go in and close a bunch of them. So I try not to add to here unless I'm pretty confident that it's a real issue that needs to be looked at or a feature that I think should be considered. And if you're going to talk about a feature, I would come in here into the pull requests or issues and then just search for some keywords, you know, around something you might want, you know, to look at to see if someone's already made this suggestion before. So you can kind of see what's been going on here. So you're not creating a new pull request or a new issue or a new feature request that doesn't already have something here. So I've like added my 2 cents on some of these that already existed, and I don't feel like I'm cluttering anything up, right? So that's kind of the way I approach it, if that helps. All right, so some other tools.
Yeah, to some extent, I think that the moderators of the Facebook group really like to keep the discussion focused on dev and master rather than the feature branches in order to, you know, keep it more mainstream.
Yeah, people get excited about automatic bolus and things like that, and maybe don't have the tools or haven't done their homework yet to figure out all of this that we're talking about. How do you find out what's been going on? So they don't want people to like find it once and like get it installed and be uncomfortable updating it again. And so then some big thing comes out that there's something dangerous with a new feature, and all these people have no idea what's going on. So that's a little concerning. So that's why we try and step into this carefully. If you're going to break from master or even from dev, like they do talk about dev. So
can I pull you back to
sure.
something that most people will understand, which is less of the technical, as more is what's in the branch, what will help me. You're at a high programming level. We've got a few on here,
Yeah,
but
sure.
just going, what's in the master, what's in the dev, why would I want one over the other, and keep it a little bit more at
Sure,
ease.
yeah. Yeah, so one of the interesting things about trying to figure out if you'd want to be in dev or in something like an automatic bolus, which is what you consider a feature branch, not like a dev or anything like that, is the documentation is often sparse, right? People aren't taking the extra time to write nice, clean lists of everything that's happening. So it's really got to kind of have your pulse on what's going on. So you either have to do a lot of reading through a bunch of conversations and kind of pick it up, or you have to look at those pull requests or the commits, I'm sorry, for each branch and kind of like sort of figure out what's going on. You can search the Facebook group and look for like dev or dev updates or whatever and kind of see if you can pick up, again, conversations and string that all together. Because one thing this group is not real good at is having this pull request for the next release where they keep adding notes as to what's being updated. So some projects do that. They keep one like pull request listed that's going to be the next version, like Night Scout does this a lot. Or you go into projects and you kind of see what the next release is, but I'm pretty sure, I guess there's a 2.1 here. So sometimes you go into projects and you kind of see what things are done in a particular branch. So this is done in dev, this stuff's like currently being tested, but you won't see automatic bolus listed here much, not with any details. And I don't think these are older pull requests. I don't think these have been updated. But the idea is that there's this project thing you can come see what's like a nice list of what's been updated, but this is not kept up to date all the time. This will have some of the bigger items updated 8 days ago, so I guess it's not too far off. So this is probably the easiest way to just kind of see a list of the big things that have made it into a particular branch, like dev or master. Keeping track of what's an automatic bolus, totally up to you. So you're going to have to go to something like Zulip chat, which is where most of this conversation is happening. And so here's Zulip, and there's a whole lot of messages I haven't read either. And you'll see all these conversations happening. So let me show you a little bit more, another tool for keeping track of changes that are happening. And then if you want to dig down deep into what's in like an automatic bolus branch, I can show you where to go. So one thing I like to do, they have a mobile app for Zulip chat. So what I do is I go into Zulip chat on my phone and I turn off all notifications for everything but the stream called #GitHub. And otherwise there's just too many notifications in general. But you can kind of see here each branch and project or repository has its own little chat. And every time a commit is done in GitHub, it writes here. It gives you a link to it, and it tells you when and to what branch it was updated. So this is my way of just kind of slowly kind of keeping track of when things come out. So you might get a notification here. I have these off on my computer here. You can see new topic if I want to. But my app on my phone shows me when anything in the GitHub section is updated. So then you kind of know that something changed. You may not necessarily easily know what changed. You may be guessing, and that's fine. Sometimes people ask questions on here. It's less common to do that, but you can see that something changed. So it's another way of finding out something changed. Your other option of just being notified is back here in GitHub. You have this watch section up here. See the little eyeball on the top? You can change your status here. Like, am I watching this? Am I not watching it? Do I just want to know when like a big release comes out? And the release is only going to tell you when master's updated, by the way, which again is probably like once or twice a year. If you say watching, this kind of tells you everything, and this is a lot of email goes into your inbox. So you may not want it, or you may want to find a way to clean up your box and like route these messages somewhere, but because it'll tell you everything. It'll tell you every time a new issue is reported, every time a new issue has a comment on it, every time there's a pull request and a comment on that, commits, all kinds of stuff. It's really honestly too much most of the time. So again, it's not a nice clean list of what's in master, what's in dev, what's in automatic bolus.
So again, for those of us less technical and less geeky in a kind way, can we look in Looped and will someone put in there's an update on AV bolus, or there's a dev update or a master update, instead of having to go into more coded stuff?
Yeah, unfortunately, no. That's kind of that's the kind of the threshold for if you want to try something other than dev, like an automatic bolus, is there's really not going to be any channels that are easy for you to pick up that things have changed. Dev, sometimes if there's a big update to dev, you'll see a post in Looped or whatever if it's a big deal. But there's been updates to dev every couple weeks for the last few months, and I haven't really seen any significant posts. Pete doesn't really go in there and say, hey, here's everything we changed. So it's either that, or you have to go into this section here and you can know that there's a commit, or you can go find if someone's talking about it somewhere. Like you might go into the development stream, and there is one for right here, automatic bolus, experimental branch, PR, which is pull request, 1219. So this is where all the conversation is going on about automatic bolus, experimental or feature branch at the moment. But there's a lot of conversation. This goes back to like January or February, something like that. So going all the way back up to the top will take a little while to read everything, but that's where like there's larger posts that have lots more text to kind of explain what's going on. And so to catch up, you'll have to spend some time reading through this conversation. But then once you are caught up, I'm only 15 messages behind, and most of them happened recently, looks like in the last few days. So I can catch up kind of on the latest conversation pretty easily. So once you're caught up, it's not too bad to kind of to keep up, as long as you kind of commit to doing that. The challenge is with something like Zulip, you actually can't turn on notifications for like a specific substream like AB. You're going to get notified of everything in all these conversations. So you just have to kind of commit to checking in, every week or two and figuring out what's going on. Maybe every month if you're behind, that's fine. So yeah, so other topics here, people are all like ideas, issues, questions, all kind of hang out here in Zulip. So that's that. Now, you do have loop docs. The easiest thing for like master is loop docs, as in the branches thingy. Come on. Branch. You'll see Katie did post a, hey, what's new in Loop 2.0? And there's a list of things here, uploading BGs in Night Scout, fixes, watch bolus confirmation screen. All these things are kind of like the high-level things that have changed in Loop 2.0. So for major releases, you're going to see stuff in Loop Docs. You're going to see it posted kind of all over. Dev, you're not going to see stuff in here too much unless it's like a significant thing, like this nonlinear carb model conversation. This was new in Dev end of last year and got moved into, late last year, and got moved into Master later on. And there was a topic kind of written up that Katie had added in Loop Docs, kind of in its own little section for a while. And eventually she kind of migrated over to here with all the new updates. Same with overrides and remote overrides, all these other features.
Can you just do a sentence or two on nonlinear or linear
sure.
linear carb model?
Yeah, for you people that have been using Loop for a while, originally you had what's called a linear carb model, which if you really want to dig into the details is over here in the algorithm section under glucose prediction. It'll talk about how it basically models carbs, how it assumes carbs will kind of impact your blood sugar. Essentially the linear, like in a line, nice straight and even is the idea, is that you put in a certain number of carbs and it assumes that those carbs are going to have impact on your blood sugar evenly as they degrade over time. So basically the carb per minute impact on your blood sugar would be spread out evenly over, let's say, 2 hours of eating a cracker or something. I would say that most of us experience the majority of food doesn't do that, right? You kind of get this initial spike of food, like from food, so the blood sugar impact of your carbs hits really soon, probably in the first half of the meal or earlier, and then kind of like isn't quite as intense later unless you have fat or protein you're dealing with. So what they changed is this non-linear carb model to sort of get closer to what food usually does. So Loop's prediction would be a little bit better. It's basically non-linear just means it's not the same as the straight, like even spreading out of carbs over time. But basically, it makes a curve. You guys have seen it on in your predictions. It now loop kind of expects more carb impact up front in the first portion, and then less later. So you can read about it here. But essentially, it's a little more accurate to how most food hits, is more carbs sooner. And the biggest thing people notice is that when you're about to eat, the prediction line starts to come up sooner. So you have fewer opportunities when you're drifting down and about to bolus for a meal, that then loop holds back a bolus recommendation because it thinks you're going to go low because the food's going to hit you so slowly. So now most food will basically make that prediction come up sooner, so you're less likely to have loop hold back insulin, which is good. So you have fewer spikes from loop when you're just doing carb things. And if you want to go back to the old one, you can. And you can find the conversation about how to do that. So, whoops, that's workspace.
So how much will you find out about dev branches in loop docs?
In loop docs, usually very little, unless it's a significant feature that requires some instructions. So a good example would be like remote overrides here in Night Scout. This was a feature that was added to dev last year, but it's fairly labor intensive to set up. And so Katie needed a place to put those instructions. So she put them in loop docs early, before they were ever in master. So she had some like notes at the top that said, hey, this is in dev, not in master, blah, 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 and then put the instructions in here. So when it's like a big feature like that, I've seen Katie add it. And again, I've only done this like a year and change. So, but she added the instructions in here because they had to be put somewhere where you could find them. But generally speaking, like all the details of exactly what's changing in dev in a nice list is not going to be in loop docs. So master is pretty much what's going to be in loop docs, generally speaking.
Is there some way that we, meaning you, can keep some updates in SoCal Loopers on these dev and in particular AB, Ivan branches?
Yeah, I can make some lists if there's something significant that are that's happening. That's not a problem. I actually haven't updated in a little while because the updates have not been significant. So in either dev or automatic bolus.
And likewise, I can update on when there's significant things in Ivan, but just like AB, Ivan's been pretty quiet on changes.
Yeah, so Ivan is a newer move to Loop. He's a developer that has experience building in the Swift language, which is what our iOS stuff, our Loop app is built in. And he wanted to help and make some changes because he was comfortable with coding. And felt like he got a little bit too much pushback on adding in some features. I feel like Pete was moving a little too slow, or he didn't like working with Pete to try to get things into Loop. So he just decided to make his own copy of Loop and kind of update it from there. So he tends to keep things updated. When things in dev get updated, he pulls over those changes, and he has his own features that he adds as well. So you're not going to find his updates in Zulip chat anymore. He's moved out of there. He's moved out of GitHub. So he has a whole nother program that uses things called Telegram or something.
Yeah, but Telegram, and yeah, I can
Telegraph,
give the Telegraph, and I can give that link. I can put that link into SoCal Loopers if
so. It's another
interested
split, in another branch, for lack of a better word, of what's going on. So that's more complicated to keep up with too. Okay, so now the question is, what is AB branch? So this is not evergreen content, right? So if you're watching this now or watching this later at some point, this is only relevant for right now. What's the date today? April something, right? April 5th of 2020. Okay, so automatic bolus branch. Why do you care? What is it? So essentially, I don't have any good pictures for you, but essentially what it does is instead of, let's bring up Tessa's chart, I guess. Instead of raising and lowering basal rates to give more insulin, sorry, it does lower basal rates still, it'll still go down. But instead of raising basal rates to higher than your scheduled basal to give you more insulin, it uses boluses instead. So all the logic's the same, right, for the most part. So if Loop wanted to give you more insulin before in normal Loop, it'll still try to give you about the same amount. The calculation is still the same in automatic bolus. So it's all about what Loop recommends to change. But you'll see here, and I probably should change this because most of you guys don't look at your basal this way. You'll still see the basal rate changes, but you notice Tesla's scheduled basal is a dotted line at the top. It basically either turns it off, picks something a little bit lower than that, or runs the basal rate. It doesn't go higher anymore. So instead, because Loop can't deliver any more insulin, just like having your max basal rate kind of set at your normal basal rate, if it can't deliver more insulin, Loop's going to recommend a bolus. If I scroll back a little bit. There we go. Okay. You'll see Loop recommended a bolus of 0.25, right? So that's because it can't deliver any more through the temp basal modulation. It can't increase your rate to give you more insulin. So it's like, hey, I'm stuck. So I'm recommending a bolus to you. That's normally what would happen. Just normally in Loop. If he couldn't give you enough insulin fast enough based on its limitations, like its max basal rate set, then it will recommend a bolus. Now just think of it as your max basal rate is always set to your scheduled basal. It's just never any higher than that. So it's always recommending a bolus when you need more insulin. So then the automatic bolus branch functionality, the idea behind it is that it takes that recommended bolus and it gives a portion of it, maybe not all of it, because it can be a little unsafe to do that if your settings aren't perfect. It'll give a portion of it as a bolus rather than increasing your basal. So this recommendation of 0.25, it's giving about 40% of that recommendation as a bolus. The exact number is probably like a 0.3, just under 0.3, for example, but there's rounding going on. And so you'll see over here, it gave Tesla a 0.15 bolus. Rather than, making her basal rate from 0.2 to like, 0.5 or 0.6 or something like that. It's just delivering some of the insulin as a bolus. So you're getting, what happens is you get more of it up front. So you're getting 40% of the recommendation is the default settings. And then the next 5 minutes comes by. And if it still recommends a bolus, it'll do 40% of that. So in theory, you end up over half an hour. Let's say your insulin needs stayed the same. Let's say it was like a pizza, extended carbs. It will recommend, instead of like running a higher basal rate for a while, for let's say, what Luke tries to do, by the way, is give you all the insulin it thinks you need over half an hour for the most part, because that's the smallest or shortest temp basal it can run. So let's say all your insulin needs stayed the same, you would get, whatever, let's say Loop recommends giving you a unit, you'll get that unit in a half an hour, just one higher basal rate that gives you that extra unit. If your insulin needs to stay the same for the whole half hour, then automatic bolus would give you actually a little bit less than that, because it'd be 40%, you kind of get this smaller number, and you get just about the same amount of insulin over that same half an hour period. But because it started with 40% as a bolus up front, rather than drip as a basal rate, you'll get more of it at the beginning. So, which is, I think, helpful because insulin is slow, right? It takes a while for it to actually do something. So if there's more insulin that's needed, I'd rather have more of it up front and less of it later, rather than evenly spread out over time. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. So basically, it's just giving boluses instead of raising your basal rate. And that's what it's doing instead. Now, it gets a little busy. You can see on my night scouts a lot of little dots, right? Overnight, you might see some too. Over here at night, boom, 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 boom. But so it's not doing anything magically different. The math, the calculation for what Loop's doing is the same. But because it's giving you more insulin sooner, the big caution I have for people trying to use automatic bolus is it will highlight, I find that it highlights bad settings much faster, right? So if you're not totally confident in your basal, following the basic guidelines we gave last week, talking about how to track your negative insulin on board and make sure that you're not falling when that's occurring, meaning your basal's too strong, then you'll probably be okay. And if you're not sure and you try to use automatic bolus, those instances where you might have basal too strong in some sections, so that will create this negative insulin on board and blood sugar falling situation. Those will occur much more frequently with automatic bolus because it's giving you more insulin sooner, and you're going to see that Loop's prediction, what it thought you needed, was wrong faster. So it will highlight things like bad carb ratios, bad ISF, and bad basal a lot more. It's sort of like running, I know I said before, it's like having your max basal set to your scheduled basal, but in the same way, if you're not comfortable raising your max basal really high on traditional loop, then you probably should be hesitant to use automatic bolus, because basically there's not as much of a limitation as to how much insulin can give. There is a limit, I should say that. So your maximum bolus setting in your settings will, no automatic bolus will be bigger than 40% of your max bolus, whatever your max bolus is set at. So that there is some cap. It's not like 40% of the biggest bolus you can imagine, but that is the other limitation. So it's 40% of what's recommended, then on top of that 40% of your max bolus, and whichever one's smaller is basically the one it will take. I think I said that right. So it'll highlight some bad stuff. Like right now, actually, Tessa's been really sensitive today, and I should be running a 90% override, and I didn't. So she's falling and has a negative insulin on board. So her basal's off, and you're going to see that a little sooner than I would have with traditional loops. Actually, I'll just do that right now. I noticed it this morning, and I got distracted. She's just more sensitive than usual today. All right. So that's essentially automatic bolus. It's a dev branch, but with the feature of the ability to turn on and off, the ability to switch from using temp basals to boluses instead. So again, you can turn it off. I think that's important to note, is that you can turn it off. You can go back to traditional loop mode in the settings if you have the automatic bolus branch option built. I've had some people that tried it and they're like, hey, you know what, it's just not working right. It's a little scary. They delete it and they do a new build. They go back to master or something like that. And I just remind you, you can just toggle the thing back to normal loop mode using temp basals instead of boluses. So there's that. Do you recommend it for a brand new looper? I've been looping for a week and doing great. I would say if you can check your basal properly, then it's worth a shot. It is much more helpful with rises and things like right now. See, Tessa's below her suspend. So Loop's not going to recommend bolus right now. Depending on what she's eating, we might still give the bolus anyways, because we know better than Loop. Like, this is going to come up faster than Loop says. But otherwise, we'll wait. And the automatic bolus is much better at catching this on its way up before it gets out of hand. There we go. There's the update. So as soon as she crosses her suspend, Loop will be much like automatic bolus gives more insulin faster, so it will give the insulin she needs for her food much sooner, and it won't be quite so bad. It'll probably still spike pretty good because she's already turning up on her own because our basal's pretty close to right, so it makes sense that she's going to start turning up. She's also running around and like that. So.
Yeah, Kenny, Sarah made a comment a little earlier that AB works well with those with low basal rates, and I believe that is
it
correct.
Does, yeah. So like even overnight, you can see here these little nudges that Tessa needed down happen much faster and sooner and more responsibly over the night than it did with basal rate modulation, because when the lower basal rates, it can turn up and turn down and turn up and turn down, and then really not deliver any insulin over 30, 40, 50 minutes sometimes. And she can slowly start to creep her way up, which is super obnoxious. So I find it's much more responsive. Nights are much better. Coming up from a low is much better. This ruined our 100% in range though, because she was playing the Wii. Getting a little too excited, I guess. So that's a bummer. But yeah, so it'll give much more insulin sooner. So
yeah, one thing several noted here on automatic bolus and Ivan, you definitely have to have you have to change to short beeps if you're using a Medtronic to make the beeps really as quiet as possible, and you definitely have to turn off beeps on the Omnipod.
Yeah. So, sorry, Sarah's asking a question that you don't recommend using a 90% override. Normally not. I would tell you that the reason is it's not for activity. And activity might be why she's going low, but where was it this morning? Here we go. So she's got negative insulin on board here, and she's not going up. She's not going down, but she's not going up. And that's half of her basal rate at the moment. And she was open loop here just because she ran away from her right link for a while, and it was fine. But she's had a couple of points here this morning where she had negative IOB and wasn't quite coming up. Normally, as soon as she's negative or 0 IOB, she's flat or coming up, like just the next reading. And it's been a little laggy. So occasionally she gets these sensitive days where she's got to run a little bit lighter basal rate all day. So 90% is just a slight lighter basal rate, and it usually is enough to kind of curb those particular situations.
Yes, Sarah also asked a question quite a long time ago about your comment on the last session on overrides and the math errors that you can get from overrides. And you know, we might want to elaborate on that later, but that's almost, you know, it's almost the same issue we're talking about here.
Yeah. If you're a caregiver and not seeing the recommendations from Loop, would AB be better? I don't see those recommendations unless I hover over the Loop icon in Night Scout. Yes. So here's another fun thing about using AB that I like is Tessa 6. So I don't have her manually bolus if I feel like she needs more insulin. I just like when she's away from me, I don't really have her do that. So the lovely thing about having, let's see if I can get one here, a recommendation more often now, because normally like we had our temp basal rate up really, our max basal rate up really high. So there's a very few instances where Loop would recommend a bolus because it's like, I can do it. Like you've given me the headroom to give as much insulin as you'd like, so I'll do it. It'll just, you know, it'd take 30 minutes to do it. So so there's almost never a recommendation. With this, there's always a recommendation when there's more insulin needed. So in this case here, there's always a recommendation. What I know Tessa can handle is either going into her Loop app or using her watch if she's wearing it. Like when she's at school, I let her wear the watch. She can just flip the watch over, hit the bolus icon on the watch, and then just take the recommendation, and we're done. So I will often text her and say, you know, bolus. And as long as there's a recommendation, she takes it. If there's not, she doesn't. But I can see that there is one here in Loop. So you're going to get more recommendations, but you're also going to have Loop still taking action. It's still going to bolus some of it, right? So that's the benefit I have as a caregiver, is that my 6-year-old can handle bolusing recommended boluses. I don't want her spinning and picking the wrong number. So it's made management easier for us in that regard. As long as our settings are decent and it's recommending a bolus like it should, I can have her take it, and I don't have to worry about her saying, well, I want you to bolus this much, and hopefully she doesn't pick the wrong number, and that could be bad. So how does correcting lows at night differ in automatic bolus? Good question. So in one sense, it doesn't. In another, it does. So if you have your basals too strong overnight and you end up with negative insulin on board and your blood sugar is falling, often happening at night, what happens is you treat, you go up, and then Loop gives you too much insulin and pushes you back down because your basals are too strong overnight. What's going to happen with automatic bolus is you're more likely for that to happen, usually within an hour or two. Whereas with the traditional Loop, it might take longer for Loop to get you, like, to break again, to give you too much insulin and get you underneath your, make you go low again. So you're going to have this thing where you're fighting a low because your basals are too strong on either version of Loop. But with auto bolus, you're guaranteed to have it happen in another hour or two. With the temp basal rate, it might see that you're curving over a little bit faster than it'd like, and it'll cut basal sooner, and you might be able to ride the bottom between your suspend and the lower part of your target a little bit more successfully and not go low again in the night. You'll still have negative IOB. You'll still end up with that. But the auto bolus will definitely make you go lower faster and easier if your settings are wrong. So this is the slide that we talked about like a week ago. Is when your basal is too strong, you have this negative insulin on board, and you're still going down, and then you treat what these arrows are. They treated, and then Loop pushed them back down. See these automatic boluses here? They're pretty significant size because this person's ISF and basal rates, but it gave that insulin much sooner and then caused the low much faster. This might stretch out over a couple hours on traditional Loop with basal rates, but with automatic bolus, you get multiple falling situations here because basals are too strong, and you'll see it faster. So Hillary's question was, is that an override situation or not? So the quick answer, you can go back and piece this together with the videos, but you could adjust the basal rate. You could do that using an override. Like, for example, my daughter, if I'd woken up, if she actually had gone low earlier this morning and had that negative insulin on board and dipping low, then I might have run a 90% override because I know she can get that way occasionally. If you're still trying to figure out your basal rate, I would just change the basal rate. But then you also need to go into Apple Health, add some insulin as a fake bolus to tell Loop you actually have more insulin in your body than it thinks to get rid of that negative IOB you're seeing. And then you should be able to go back to sleep just fine. You might use an override that just puts your target up higher, but doesn't necessarily change your basal. You could, in a pinch, run like a dramatically lower, like 50% override for an hour instead of messing with Apple Health, like I just mentioned. Again, go back and watch the videos if you need to. And then automatic bolus does work for both pumps, Omnipod and the Medtronic pumps. It's not a problem.
Sarah actually had a question quite a long time ago, and I deferred it. But
Oh.
What is the reason that you use Night Scout Dev instead of the mainstream version of Night Scout?
Good question. How does does it look like I'm using Dev? I guess it must. Oh, you guys saw at the bottom.
You are using Dev because you saw the version number.
Yes. Okay, so I'm using Dev and Night Scout because there was a bug in how, like, if you turned your Night Scout like sideways on your phone or smaller screens, some weird things were happening when the newest version of Night Scout came out. And so I reported it, and someone tried to fix it for me, which was great, but a fix in the code, and they pushed it to Dev.
Sarah actually had some questions, asked for some comment on Ivan quite a bit earlier, and I deferred that also. I think maybe the only, all right, if I make a little comment on Ivan,
Yeah,
Joanne?
go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am an Ivan user, and there's really 4 things in Ivan that make it different than AB, just to sort of be high level. One is that it does use a different carb model as its default. It is changeable back to the what I now would call the normal carb model. It does have a few more features on the automatic bolus setup than the AB branch. It has a backup and restore function that's actually really, really neat that some people like. And it does have the ability to use Night Scout as a bridge CGM. So, like, for instance, I've actually been able to use it on Guardian Connect, getting Guardian Connect to go to Night Scout, and then use the Night Scout on a separate account as a CGM into Ivan. Now, I don't normally do that, but I have done it.
Yep, those are good.
Marianne, you are right. Ivan does require iOS
13, yes.
And
Loop will too, yeah. Not yet, but soon. You can set a temp. Yes, yeah, that's true. In the Ivan branch, he did add the ability to pick a temporary basal rate and actually tell it to run in open loop mode, which is super cool. That is very fun. Yes, and if you disconnect from a Riley link, that basal will run for up to 30 minutes. Another cool thing about automatic bolus is that you don't have that problem, right? So that one of the risks of increasing your maximum basal rate normally is that you could have that temp basal rate stuck running if you disconnect, and it might be too much and Loop can't turn it off. But with automatic bolus, you get your bolus up front, 40%, and then if you disconnect from Loop, then you don't end up getting more insulin. So it's a pro and con, but you won't get it stuck on a really high basal rate. But you also won't get any more insulin because it's only doing it through boluses. So it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse. Where you disconnect, I think it causes a little bit less of a problem than having a really high max basal and risking that being stuck on when you disconnect. So I think that's another benefit of automatic bolus. So,
All right, everybody. Thank you. Please be safe. Have a good day. And we'll catch up real soon.